Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Friends, before going into the details of the war, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell. Please support by subscribing and turning on the notification bell. We are a strong community. Kneeling woman greets her grandson. Touching video about liberation of Kherson. A touching video of an old lady from Kherson greeting her grandson, a fighter of Ukraine's armed forces, has gained popularity online. The video was published by Anatoly Stefan, a serviceman of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, and Yuri Sobolevsky, the head of the executive office of the Kherson Regional Council. The lady came out of the house and knelt by the open gate. A man in a military uniform with a yellow ribbon on his arm rushes across the road to her. The guy squats next to his grandmother, puts the machine gun on the ground and hugs the old woman. In this video, one of our team members enters his home in Kherson, where he is met by his own grandmother, writes Sobolevsky. Anatoly Stefan calls these shots historical. A grandmother on her knees meets her grandson who liberated Kherson. No comments. Ukrainska Pravda. Life tried to contact Ole, the man on the video, but he is still out of touch. On the 11th of November 2022, units of the Armed Forces of Ukraine entered Kherson. Local residents took to the streets and welcomed the Ukrainian troops. A humanitarian catastrophe, as Ukraine counts the cost of Russia's Kherson retreat after celebrating the liberation of Kherson, which brought jubilant people to the streets of several Ukrainian cities. Officials are now warning of an unfolding humanitarian disaster. Ukrainian police have returned to the streets of the southern city, along with TV and radio services, but officials have described a catastrophe. Humanitarian aid supplies have begun to arrive from neighboring Mykolaiv region, but an advisor to Kherson's mayor, Roman Holovnia, said the remaining residents lack water, medicine and food, and key basics like bread went unbaked because of a lack of electricity. The Russian retreat represented a significant setback for the Kremlin some 6 weeks after Russian President Vladimir Putin annexed the Kherson region and 3 other provinces in southern and eastern Ukraine in breach of international law and declared them Russian territory. The National Police Chief of Ukraine, Ihor Klimenko, said Saturday on Facebook that about 200 officers were at work in the city, setting up checkpoints and documenting evidence of possible war crimes. Police teams also were working to identify and neutralize unexploded ordnance, and one sapper was wounded Saturday while demining an administrative building, Klimenko said. Ukraine's communications watchdogs said national TV and radio broadcasts had resumed, and an advisor to Kherson's mayor said humanitarian aid and supplies had begun to arrive from the neighboring Mykolaiv region. But the advisor, Roman Holovnia, described the situation in Kherson as a humanitarian catastrophe. He said the remaining residents lacked water, medicine and food, and key basics like bread went unbaked because of lack of electricity. The occupiers and collaborators did everything possible so that those people who remained in the city suffered as much as possible over those days, weeks, months of waiting for Ukraine's forces to arrive, Holovnia said. Water supplies are practically non-existent. The chairman of Khersonoblenergo, the region's pre-war power provider, said electricity was being returned to every settlement in the Kherson region immediately after the liberation. Despite the efforts to restore normal civilian life, Russian forces remain close by. The General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces said Saturday the Russians were fortifying their battle lines on the river's eastern bank after abandoning the capital. About 70% of the Kherson region still remains under Russian control. President Volodymyr Zelensky said in his nightly video address Saturday that Ukrainian forces have established control of more than 60 settlements in the Kherson region, and stabilization measures are also ongoing in Kherson itself. Everywhere in the liberated territory, our explosives technicians have a lot of work to do. Almost 2,000 explosive items have already been removed, Zelensky said. Before fleeing from Kherson, the occupiers destroyed all critical infrastructure, communication, water supply, heat, electricity. Photos on social media Saturday showed Ukrainian activists removing memorial plaques put up by the occupation authorities the Kremlin installed to run the Kherson region. A Telegram post on Yellow Ribbon, Ukrainian resistance movement, showed two people in a park taking down plaques picturing Soviet-era military figures. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba raised the prospect of the Ukrainian army finding evidence of possible Russian war crimes in Kherson, just as it did after Russian pullbacks in the Kyiv and Kharkiv regions. Every time we liberate a piece of our territory, when we enter a city liberated from Russian army, we find torture rooms and mass graves with civilians tortured and murdered by Russian army in the course of the occupation, Ukraine's top diplomat said at the ASEAN summit in Cambodia this weekend. It's not easy to speak with people like this. But I said that every war ends with diplomacy and Russia has to approach talks in good faith. As climate clock ticks, war in Ukraine upends Arctic research. A team of Russian and Norwegian scientists stumbled upon the fastest warming hotspot known on Earth. Then the war began. Tromsø, Norway, in a cold basement room in the Arctic, Andreas Altenberger moves among row after row of marine specimens. A tall narrow jar holds a shark. Velvet Belly Lantern Shark, 1923, reads the label in old-fashioned flowery script. In other containers, brown-gray deep-sea sponges sway in ethanol. In one jar sits a lavender-gray spoonarm octopus the size of a child's fist. Altenberger, 41, oversees the Polar Museum's specimen collection in Tromsø, a small but lively city that serves as a gateway for climate researchers studying the Arctic Ocean's warming waters. Set on an island off the Norwegian mainland, Tromsø, with just more than 75,000 inhabitants, is the largest non-Russian municipality within the Arctic Circle, the 20 million square kilometer, 7.7 million square mile, cap at the north end of the world. Winters in Tromsø mean 6 weeks of polar night when the sun never rises and the dark sky is spangled by the occasional northern lights. But in August, after a few hours of darkness, day begins breaking around 3 a.m., and by 8 the streets are bustling with university students. Tromsø is home to the world's northernmost university, symphony orchestra, top-level football club and Burger King. On weekends, Norwegian climatologists, American polar ecologists, and German glaciologists crowd into the local record store for shows or buy hot dogs from a wooden stand in the main square. The slight and bespectacled Altenberger, a marine invertebrate researcher, will next week lead an expedition to Svalbard, an icy archipelago 960 kilometers, 600 miles, northeast, to collect marine fauna from the Barents Sea. The Barents is the part of the Arctic Ocean off the northern coasts of Norway and Russia. It is one of the fastest warming places on Earth. About 2/3 of Barents Sea ice has disappeared in the last 45 years, which in turn accelerates Arctic warming, creating a feedback loop. Barents specimens, sponges and sea snails, blind marine worms and tiny mud dragons, could help researchers understand the effects of that warming. By properly identifying species, we can correctly assess the impact of climate change on species distribution and extinction, Altenberger explained. But climate research in Tromsø has run into obstacles caused by Russia's war in Ukraine. For Altenberger, the bottleneck is the identification of species. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video.